Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first of its kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. So, Mark, kind of a weird time in history right now.
You think?
Man, can a lot change in a week from last time we did an episode. Last time you and I talked, this coronavirus was kind of a scary thing, and but was sort of a distant thing and whatever. But I can tell you, for me, 2 Costco shopping trips and probably too many news articles later, it's kind of a high stress environment right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots going on.
People didn't quite know what to think about it. There was a lot of joking and humor going on.
Yes.
And especially with the toilet paper lines, people racing out of Costco with pallets of toilet paper, renting trucks so that they could come and haul the toilet paper away.
Yes.
And everyone's like, what the world's gone mad. But now it's kind of on if daily and even hourly, you don't know what's going to happen next. And
Totally.
It is creating a lot of havoc. And, you and I spend every day working with clients, and we really focus on this thing about the survival brain.
Yes.
When things get tough, life gets difficult, the little survival brain takes over and starts implementing all of its own strategies. Right? What do I do? Oh my gosh. And then if you allow it to take over, then of course it will implement all kinds of things. And that's what we deal with regard to addiction. It's because when life gets tough, my brain learns, especially when I'm young, to run to these addiction outlets. They become my go-to place. This reliable, instantly accessible, powerful place that I run to. But the challenge now in the world is that virtually everyone is facing this, quote, addiction-like scenario where life is unmanageable and my brain's freaking out and it wants to run to all of these solutions. And so lots of people all over the place are facing the kinds of things that we have faced in our own addiction past that we help our clients with. It's like we're all kind of in the same boat now.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I look at all you got to do is turn on the news for 10 minutes and 5 minutes even, and you can see how on a global scale the war between the midbrain and the war between the prefrontal cortex is kind of just playing out. It's scary. I mean, and to be fair, I mean, there's a lot to be justifiably scared about. I mean, you think about the different stresses. We were talking a little bit about this morning. I mean, financially, right? Financially, things are just crazy. Don't don't turn on the stock market if you're having a good day today. um, it's a little bit rough out there. You know, there's a lot of instability with income. Different people are obviously, some people are lucky and they're able to work from home. Other businesses kind of have to stay open, but then there are others that are just closing, or events were that people were planning on that they're no longer able to to have, that they rely on for work. Um, you know, there's increased health and supply expenses, right? Your Costco example is a perfect one. When things get the budget gets a little tighter, when all of a sudden your toilet paper budget for the month goes to like $700 because you
Yeah,
had to buy 5 years worth.
yeah.
so, so yeah, I mean, we got the financial stuff, and then there's the emotional side, right? I will totally out myself. It has been hard not to feel really down, and really anxious. You know, you watch this scenario, and like I said, it's we're going to talk about this more in the later, but things are just changing so quickly, and people know so little. And when there's a lack of information, that makes things scary. Um, there's a lot of isolation going on, right? People aren't safe to, be spending time together. You know, we're getting all sorts of recommendations: no more big gatherings. You're supposed to, as much as you can, stay 6 feet away from people if you do need to go out. Just a scary, scary time. And I think that causes some unique relationship challenges too, don't you think?
Well, for sure, because we're designed to be social beings, and when you have a situation that cuts us off from that, that's crazy difficult
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
look to each other for support. It's one of the things you and I talk about all the time. The reason why addiction is so destructive is because it isolates us and disconnects us from those around us.
Yes.
Now we have this
Yeah.
global event taking place that really is causing, in many cases, the same thing. It's disconnecting human beings from human beings. And when you shut off that support system from us, the brain's going to take over and conjure up all kinds of things.
Yes.
It's like, well, I guess I got to take over now because there's no support structure. So let's hunker down and start conjuring up all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the emotions get really tough.
When I think it's emotions with neighbors and friends and all that stuff, because you're right, that survival mode starts to kick in. I mean, the scary reality is people just do not, they will do things in a place of panic, right? That they would not normally do
Yeah.
in a healthier mindset, because there's very much a scarcity mentality going on. There's a lot of scary stuff happening. In fact, I was reading a news story. I mean, it made me chuckle, but want to cry at the same time. There are several towns in some countries overseas where they've already seen, like in China and some other places where the coronavirus has been going around the most frequently, and divorce rates in some areas are actually starting to spike.
Hmm.
It's pretty wild. I was just looking at a couple of the news stories here right now, and they're attributing that, they think, in part due to a lot of these couples. Their marriage is kind of based on working, with them being away from each other
Oh, yeah, yeah.
for 8 hours a day. and
Mm.
now, and now that people are spending time together, it's a big adjustment for some of these people, and some people are really, really struggling with it. I got to tell you, that's something that I didn't really see happening, but as I'm reading about it, I can definitely see a world in which that would happen. These kind of situations, I don't know. To me, and you tell me what you think, but they tend to, when we're up against this kind of stuff, in my experience, connection either goes really up or goes really down. It very rarely just kind of remains constant, right? People tend to either draw closer together and really kind of circle the wagons and unite, or the other scarier side is kind of the chaos side of things.
Yeah, this kind of crisis can really be a magnifying glass. It'll take your relationship and suddenly magnify and blow it up. And if it's good, it'll be better. And if there's a lot of challenges, they can be magnified to be worse. And
Yeah,
so it really does kind of put the spotlight on all of it, and it'll get you to the place where you'll be forced to say, where are we? Where
absolutely.
is this relationship? And so that's part of it. The other thing is we're creatures of habit. We love routines. We love to be in patterns. And
Yes.
suddenly when that gets interrupted, The brain doesn't react well. It wants its
Mm,
routine. Give me
sure.
sameness, give me predictability, and now suddenly that's all uprooted. And where we had the escape of going off to our jobs or what have you, now
Yes.
suddenly we're thrust together in the same house hour after hour, day after day, and we can't help but things are going to happen with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of a perfect storm kind of scenario that we see coming together.
Well, on the parenting side of thing, I think, a lot of my clients are parents. I don't have children, but, a lot of parents, both physically, but also emotionally, in many ways rely on their kids being able to go to school, right?
Yeah,
Like you said, there is that kind of time to recharge for a mom or a dad who's usually home with the kids the rest of the time. Then there's also that just the financial side. A lot of people's lives are structured right that way, where they're reliant on that. Their work schedules and everything else is kind of set up around that. And like you say, there's just lots of shifts going on, and that instability. I think that mixing up of the routine you talk about, all that just heightens all of these issues that we're talking about. I
yeah.
mean, if we look at our addicts, right? I mean, what implications is this having on the addiction? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think on the addiction side, it would depend on how far along someone is in recovery.
Sure. Yeah,
If they're
definitely.
not very far along in recovery and they still have a brain wiring that says, "Hey, when things get tough, I know where to run to."
Yes.
And if you want to talk about things getting tough and having lots of triggers and reasons for the brain to seek self-soothing and to seek escape, we're in that time right now. So if I, as an addict, really haven't begun to develop any kind of alternative skills, if I don't have other options that I've been
Mm-hmm.
practicing, if I haven't been, digging down under the surface to get to a lot of the core driving forces behind my addiction, and I'm just either don't have much progress in recovery, or maybe let's say I've been white knuckling it. I've just been using sheer willpower to stay away from my addiction. Boy, all that stuff goes out the window so quick in this scenario.
Yeah.
And so I would suspect that addiction rates, not just with pornography and sexual addiction, I would suspect that all kinds of addiction rates are going off the charts right now.
Sure.
Substance abuse and behavioral addictions, just all the different ways, food addiction.
Yeah.
If part of how I cope is to get angry, or part of how I cope is to shut down and to get depressed and go quiet, you're probably seeing all these strategies on steroids right now where they're
Yeah.
really manifesting themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think about, our addict clients as well. I mean, these relationship, for the addict who's in a committed relationship, for example, these relationships obviously are already strained, right? And you and I know how that goes,
Oh, yeah.
having been there. And like you and I've talked about, relationships are just hard in general. But when you're going through, they're a lot of work. But when you're going through the recovery process, and there's already that rapid change, that rapid flux that's going on, and then you add in, a significant world event like this that nobody was really anticipating, it can really throw a wrench in a lot of the situations that are going on. Even in the way that you and I do our jobs, right? My clinic is all switching to all online therapy now, so I can keep myself and clients safe and kind of do my part to not spread stuff, and that changes the dynamic and even how you get therapy, how you get help, not just in the mental health world, but with anything, right?
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
all of a sudden going and seeing your neighbor or something becomes a much bigger deal than it was, even just a couple of days ago. And when you're talking about for an addict, right? And we talk about some of those common triggers that usually push on guys, that emotional isolation, right? Outside significant outside stressors, finances. I mean, all of those things, those are all increased right now. And so I'm excited for this episode today because we're going to talk about all this and how to overcome the different challenges and struggles that are unique, not just to recovery, but really for most people who are navigating through this scary time in our world. And we're going to talk a little bit about how do you cope and how do you keep connection going, because that's critical, right? How do we keep those both those things going? Where do we start here, Mark? Should we start with self care?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the greatest place to start. We've
Good
kind of
call.
talked about if you're, well, this sounds funny now, but if you're on an airplane and the cabin loses pressure, and the first thing that you're told to do is to secure your own oxygen mask.
Yep.
The tendency is to look around you. Okay, who needs help? The little kid beside me, or the guy in front of me, or the gal behind? No, you secure your own oxygen mask so that you are then in a place where you're able to help others. So I
Yes.
think self care is the place to start. That it really has to begin there.
Oh, I'd agree. I mean, and you and I've talked about this before, right? But to your point, self care absolutely has to be one of those things that we're all engaging in on a daily basis, and it's important, I think, for just healthy, good emotional living, right?
Hmm.
But especially in times like this, the good news is because we kind of talked about the doomsday, the heart of this whole thing, right? All these different triggers and things that we're facing in the world, and those are all, not to minimize any of those, because they are all very significant. They all require intervention. But the nice thing is, I guess the flip side is that a lot of this stuff, as far as our own mental health, and for our listeners out there, a lot of this stuff is very much in their control. Higher triggers, for example, does not need to result in a higher rate of relapse. Heightened triggers, heightened stress doesn't need to become more fighting in your relationship. In fact, or intimate relationships. In fact, it can actually have the opposite effect. And that's kind of where we want to go with that. And like you're saying, the beginning of that really does start with the self care thing. So if we talk self care, as you know, we've mentioned this in some episodes in the past. I mean, there are some standard go tos, but there are some ways to mix some things up as well. Um, Journaling, I have found for clients, is a hugely important component of self care on every level. And especially when you're dealing with the world the way that it is now, I tend to look at journaling as sort of the emotional plumbing system of the brain, right? It's a place for me to get the crap out, to get feelings or fears or angers or whatever it might be in my mind that are just kind of rattling around, bouncing around up in there, out onto paper so that I can give those things away. And we're going to talk about the giving away part in a little bit here. But journaling I found to be super helpful. Also, getting outside if you can. Obviously, that varies by where you're living and your circumstances, but being able to get outside of the house if you can, take a walk, just get some fresh air, or whatever that takes, can be really helpful, especially when you're kind of indoors all the time. What are some of the things that you're doing right now?
Well, I think as you're talking about that, to me, one of the big things that will just pound on your brain over and over again is the fact that I don't have any control.
Yes,
And the survival brain will try to focus on what I can't do. Well, this is impossible, and that's not possible, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And pretty
absolutely.
soon you'll spiral so out of control so quickly because you feel out of control. I can't direct any part of my life right now. And I think it's really important to look to focus as much as you can on what can I control. And I love when you mentioned journaling, for example. Journaling, I can decide when to do that, how to do it, the setting, the fact that I'm just writing down what I'm honestly and rawly feeling inside. I control that situation. That is something that I can direct. And I
Yes.
think it's one of the reasons journaling is so powerful. This is me doing this in this moment the way I choose when these emotions are going to come out, how they're going to be expressed, instead of just being purely reactive, where
Hmm.
situations around me are happening, my emotions are triggered, and now before I know it, I'm just reactive all the time. Instead of this approach is okay, just step back, become a watcher of your emotions, and sit down and process through them because you choose to do it in this moment. That's going to have a really powerful impact on how much control I feel that I'm having. So, love journaling, love getting outside. I can't go visit my neighbors, but can I go take a walk in the park?
Yeah.
Or that I keep my distance? Can I keep walking my dog? What are the things that you can do? And that, try to make that the focus of the things that are possible, and resist the brain's tendency to shut down and isolate, because it wants
Yes.
to be a hermit in these times. It wants to just go into the fetal position in a dark corner and just close everything else and everyone else out.
Yes.
And that is not what we need right now.
No, absolutely. I think you are 100% correct. And I think there is that natural tendency to, again, kind of circle the wagons either around your own or just mentally and emotionally. And that connection piece is absolutely critical. When we talk about that midbrain that we've referred to here and in previous episodes, that fight, flight, and freeze response, those can really be haphazard, not just in terms of society, but in terms of your own mental state. Learning to practice mindfulness and just being present, right? With the fact that there is a lot of chaos and being able to focus on, what are the things in this situation that are in my control and how do I work on those, right? Versus the things that are outside of my control. Um, it's a really important component if we're all going to weather this. I mean, by some estimates, a lot of us could be at home in this kind of semi-isolated state with family and others for quite a while. This could go
Yeah,
on for a
yeah,
good amount of time, and so please don't buy into that notion that, oh, this will just blow over. I mean, it might. That would be wonderful, and if it does, great. But as you and I say all the time, Mark, the time to start doing self care is not when you feel like you start needing it. The time to do self care is beforehand, so that you get to a point where it doesn't become kind of a dire need, right?
yeah,
By the time you feel isolated, you've probably been isolated for too long.
yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and so that, yeah, focusing on what you can do, and that really brings us to this other place that becomes really important when things are so unpredictable and quote scary around us. One of the other really important things we can do is try to establish and maintain some kind of routine,
yes,
some kind of regular pattern in your daily life. Try to have, your meditation or some study time the same time during the day. Try to have, the way that you're taking care of yourself, your hygiene, just whatever things you can keep on track so that things stay as normal as possible. I think you're better off doing that.
yeah,
Don't give in to resorting to chaos, where what's happening around you dictates everything that you're doing, and everything that you're thinking is coming
totally.
from outside pressures. Try to stay into that routine as much as possible, and help your loved ones to do the same. Create a good, solid, comforting routine in your home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey everybody, Mark and Steve here. Are you looking to take your recovery and your marriage to the next level?
We work with individuals and couples one on one.
With both in-person and online therapy options, you have access to the experts anytime, anywhere.
To learn more, visit us at pbsepodcast.com. So I think it'd be good right now, just keep an eye on our time here, because I know both of us can go over really easily. I think it would be good to dial in on some real concrete things, some specific things that people can do, in addition to kind of this general guidance that we're giving.
Yep.
That I think will really be helpful for people. We talked about journaling, which is good. That's that individual checking in with self. In past a couple episodes ago, we talked about establishing a daily check-in with a spouse, right? So what we're going to talk about here, all you guys, is going to be for you listeners specifically who are tuning in because you're in that recovery process, either individually from addiction or with your spouse or both. Daily check-ins with a spouse during times like this become extra critical, not just from the perspective of, hey, hey, this is where I'm at sobriety wise, right? Here are the things that I've been feeling today, but specifically, what is working in this relationship today and what is not. Things can either things can go really, really sour really quickly when you're in close quarters like this. right? Stupid things that might not bother you before might drive you crazy, right? Your husband peeing on the toilet seat probably wasn't that big of a deal when it happened once a week, but now he's there all the time. And it might drive you nuts. So there can be all sorts of aspects with that, but everything from the relationship with your spouse to also the parenting of the kids, keeping an eye on the kids' mental and emotional health. How are they holding up with this? And maintaining your relationship with each other is going to be extra critical because those kids are looking to you, like you talked about, to provide that stability, right? That structure. Um, it's okay to obviously be stressed and struggling, but check-ins are one of the ways that you can continue to draw closer to your spouse rather than away from them. And while we're talking about that, I would recommend, and this will be part of the assignment today, I would suggest really setting up don't make it formal, but with your kids, a daily check-in with your kids. Hey, keeping it real. Hey, how are you doing? I know this is kind of a scary time. Everything going okay? I want to make sure that you're doing well, and if there's anything I can be doing for you, we're all in this together, right? Keeping those connections going is going to be absolutely critical. Recovery connections. So let's talk that. I know with my 12-step group that I attend every week, I'm going to be sending out a text. I was thinking about it before we started filming, and I'm going to be sending out a text to the leadership of my 12-step support group about the need to, let's see if we can get an online option going, because those are, if they're not completely restricted now, are rapidly becoming so depending on where you live. And so being able to continue those recovery connections is going to be absolutely critical. Being able to have that camaraderie, to have that community that you can continue to reach out to. Like Mark, you indicated, it's so easy to kind of go into isolation mode and to just go solo. That isn't good for general emotional health. For an addict, it's a relapse death sentence. It really is. Isolation will do in recovery quicker than just about anything. And so kind of exploring those options, getting outside the box in terms of how do I keep these relationships with other people going? I was talking to my family via text this week because we usually do like a family dinner, usually like on a Saturday or Sunday once a month. Well, this last time we missed it because of all this crazy business.
Mm.
So we're going to be setting up an actual like family Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
There we there you go. Zoom should be giving us a
Yeah.
Zoom, our primary sponsor, your choice for video conferencing. No, or whatever it is, right? But like being able to set that up so that we can still have that interaction, right? Where we can just have some community time, getting outside of, even if it's just virtually outside of the house, and making those and maintaining those connections. It's going to be critical for everybody, but but it's going to be critical for you guys. And there is a real turning point here because there's an opportunity, if we take advantage of it, to really be able to develop additional trust and solidity in the relationship. If you guys can weather difficult times like this, it's going to just add that much more confidence to the relationship in terms of what you're seeking. Knowing that we can make this, we can do it. This is not impossible. This thing really is fixable.
Well, and another thing I think is really important for all of us to take a look at is to expect that emotions are going to be high.
Yep.
The brain's
Yep.
going to freak out, and we have to really look to have some patience with each other, compassion, and understand. Well, people are going to spout off and say things. People are going to get angry. They're going to do things that normally we would perhaps allow ourselves to become offended by it.
Sure.
It's really important that we step back and just say, okay, let me take a place of real compassion and patience and consider what's going on, and the fact that people aren't going to behave in totally predictable, normal, healthy ways. It's just to be expected. And the more
Absolutely.
patient we can be with ourselves and others in that, and just seek to go to a place of empathy as much as possible. how
Yeah.
can i how can i sit down in the ashes with the people around me and just hug them and be with them and feel with them, and not have to solve everything and not get offended and not get caught up, but let's just be with each other in the raw and real emotions of all this, and just show as much true empathy as you possibly can. It's probably the most powerful thing we can do to connect to each other.
Absolutely. No, I love what you're saying, and getting outside of your own head, right, is what's coming to mind as you're talking about that. I mean, so critical again for just general good mental health, but especially when times are difficult like this, it is so easy to focus on your own problems, your own challenges and issues, and obviously that's definitely needed. But being able to get outside of yourself, right? Call a neighbor up and see if they need help with something. I called a colleague the other day, just yesterday actually, and asked if his family needed anything. We actually run competing practices, but he and I had a good chat, and it's a time to draw together because it's really easy to pull apart, especially with what's going on, like you said. I mean, people are going to react and do things right now that normally they wouldn't, and not only that, but we're all going to be probably more reactive to those things, right?
Yep.
And it's really easy for stuff to get out of control that way. So some of that daily service where possible, again, getting outside of your own head. Is there something that you can do for somebody today, even if it's just little, even if it's just calling and reaching out to a relative? They'll benefit, you'll benefit, everybody wins. So that would be a really good thing. Um, the spiritual God piece. This is pretty critical, right? The spiritual component of this is it can be really scary. I know you and I have shared a lot of our stories on here, but for me, as you know, back when I was in heavy addiction and was still dealing with a lot of the emotional damage and the fear and everything that comes with that, a lot of that God wounding or God wounds, God issues that we've talked about really would amplify during difficult times, right? Questions that we tend to have most of the time, it's easier for those to become even more amplified. Things like, I don't trust you. Will you actually take care of me? Right? Will I make it through this? You've never been there for me when I really need you before. So why would you now? Right?
Yeah.
Would you let me know if there was something I really needed to know about on the horizon? Right? There's all sorts of questions that kind of arise that become more apparent when things are difficult. So Mark is our resident chaplain. So he's the spiritual giant of this duo. Mark,
That's scary.
the blind leading the blind around here. Um, Mark, I'd be curious. I mean, from a spiritual perspective, what do you find helpful when things are like this? What's helpful for you? What's helpful for your clients?
Well, I think one of the big things, this is not the time when a more formal approach to spirituality is needed. We can
Yeah,
tend in our religious culture and our religious upbringing to become very formal in how we have our spiritual communication. I got to kneel a certain way, I got to use a certain vocabulary. It's got to be a certain time of the day. And I would really encourage all of us, this is a time to be raw and real and open with God and whatever he or that is for you. This is time for just open conversation, just expressing and dialoguing wherever you are, whenever it is. I mean, you can be just walking along having a dialogue in your head, you can be driving in your car conversing with God. This is the time to be as open and raw and vulnerable as you possibly can.
absolutely.
Because I think that more formal spirituality, that more rigid spirituality, can tend to put more pressure on us in these times, and not really be the connection as connecting and fulfilling and nurturing as we need. So I guess I'm saying let it all hang out spiritually.
Yeah,
Whatever you're feeling, say. Whatever
yeah,
dialogue you want to have straight down to God. I I don't know if I trust you right now. I'm scared to death, and I don't feel like you're
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, is whatever you're feeling deep inside, he's there to hear it. So dialogue as open and raw as you can.
I think that's excellent, excellent advice. I agree with you. That connection. I'm a big believer that that connection with your higher power, with your God, is just it functions in many ways, right? The same way as any other relationship. And if I'm going to have a real relationship with God, I've got to be able to be real, right? Like you said, God, I am scared crapless. Like this is a scary time. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty, and
Yeah.
being able to have a place where you can leave that is important. As we're talking about this, the thing that comes to mind for me is that the 12 steps can actually be really helpful with this. Obviously, you and I are big 12 step guys. We reference them on a fairly regular basis. And as you and I were talking about this morning, you had pointed out how steps 1, 2, and 3 can be really powerful. And so I think it'd be good to kind of shift to that and look at that really quick and just see how that can be used to be of help, right?
Yeah.
If you look at step one of the 12 steps, it's that we admitted that we were powerless over whatever thing it is in our life that we're up against, right? That we can't change. In this case, it could be social panic, it could be coronavirus itself, it could be um, the fact that the divorce rate is skyrocketing in China. It could be any number of things, right? There's just a whole slew of stresses that we all have going on right now, in addition to just the day to day. But coming to admit that we're powerless over those things and then going on with the steps, and that our lives have become unmanageable because of them. In other words, coming to that place of acceptance, right? It sounds sort of self evident, but I would dare say that many of us are not quite at that place. One, because we don't have all the knowledge, but two, a lot. I think it's human nature to kind of hold on to right other things for stability. Um, and when those things start to become unmanageable, when times get scary and there's a lot of uncertainty, it's easy to want to kind of go back and try to control those things that you can't, right? When the reality is that there is a huge chunk of this situation that we're all dealing with that is out of the majority of ours control. And so there's a real power, I think, in being able to come to that place of acceptance, not defeat, right? Not just giving in and saying, well, there's nothing I could do. We're screwed. We're all going to die. But from a perspective of let me go through an inventory, the things that I can work on and change, and then target those and devote my mental, my emotional, my spiritual energy to those things so that I'm not spending them on things that I can't.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Coming to that place where it's like, I really can't control most of what's going on.
Mhm.
And if I can't, is there someone who can? Is there
Yes.
someone outside of me that I can begin to turn to now, right? And that's the second step of the first three steps. If I'm powerless, who does have power? Well, God has all power, and so can I get myself to the place where I'm willing to turn to him and be open to how he can guide and direct me in this process, right? And so stop if I can stop trying to control everything and let go of that, and then be willing and open to his influence and his wisdom, then of course step 3, which can be the hardest, right? I know I don't have the power, I know he does, but now in step 3 I'm willing to actually turn my life over to his wisdom and his guidance, whatever that is. And so for me, I try to practice what we call the surrender process. Okay,
Yeah.
God, what I'm able to do isn't enough now. It's not, I don't even know what to do in this moment, but you
Mhm.
know everything. And so I'm going to set aside my stress and my worry and my fear for a moment. I'm going to put it over here on this shelf, and I'm going to open myself now to your guidance and direction. And I'm going to see what ideas come to my mind, what little impressions I get, what little insights I start to receive, and then I'm going to ask for the courage and the power to actually implement that.
Mm.
So, done doing it my way, open to your way. Now here comes some little impressions, and then I'm going to act on them.
Mm. Yeah.
To me, there's the first 3 steps.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you summed it up really well, right? Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore us, right?
Yep.
Step 3, making a decision to turn that will and life over to God. And I know you and I could talk about 12-step stuff all day, so we won't do that for sake of time. We might expand on another day, but there is such a power, I got to tell you, to living the 12 steps, especially in situations like this. Right? There's a phrase that kind of circulates in pretty much any 12-step group, regardless of what fellowships you attend or why. And it's this concept of one day at a time.
Mm,
Right now, we are living in a world where experts are telling us, literally, like the world's smartest people are telling us, we have to take this one day at a time because nobody really knows exactly what is going to happen and how. right? We're in very much uncharted waters in a place that society hasn't been in a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
And it is kind of that ultimate act of surrender, right? I know that for any addict, and again, we have discussed this before, but for our listeners, any addict has to hit at some point in time what we call rock bottom, right? And it becomes that. Now, my thoughts on rock bottoms are, that's another discussion for another day. But if we were to kind of look at that rock bottom, usually what we're referring to is that thing or an event that brings a person to that place of, oh, I'm going to stick and cling to my old ways of doing things, right? Takes them to a place from doing that to saying, what I'm doing is not working. And clearly I have to do something different. And on a spiritual level, for many of us, this has the opportunity, and I do use that word opportunity, to be kind of almost a mini rock bottom, right? Because we're staring in the face this issue where, again, it is completely beyond most of our control. And there is that, if we're able to, like you say, practice that vulnerability and that transparency, not just in our relationships with our spouse or with our kids or with our neighbors, but with our God, with our higher power, there can be a real development of that relationship there, whatever that is for you. And so, not to just try and put a positive spin on this, but the reality is that we are dealing with a situation that presents a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities to draw closer together, to unify both as a community and spiritually, to unify in relationships and marriages, and to give ourselves more evidence that, these relationships that we're forming, that we're building, they can endure tough stuff. Because every time it overcomes one of those tough stuff challenges, it becomes a little more solid, becomes a little more stable, becomes a little more safe. And because it becomes all three of those things, it becomes a lot more intimate. So, with that in mind, well, gosh, what time is flying? We're already almost at the 40-minute mark here. So we're exercising long-winded. Appreciate you guys hanging in there with us today. As far as an assignment goes this week, we're going to go ahead and give you something to work on, kind of on the fly here. That's coming to mind as we're talking. If you want to work on some of this one day at a time stuff and exercising, good control or influence in your life, this is the assignment we're going to give each of you. An assignment I use in my practice all the time. So I want you to make a big list of every single thing that is stressing you out. Don't just, if you're having issues with the kids at home, or if you're having issues with your husband Jim, don't just put Jim. Like, be specific, right? What are the different issues that you're having with Jim? What ways are you struggling with connecting with him, or whoever? And it's not just connections, right? Other stressors, the financial stuff, the spiritual stuff we've talked about. So be as detailed as you can. So you make that list in one column, either on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet, and then you have a really small column in the middle. And for each one of those stressors, you're going to go through and you're going to mark it with a yes, with a no, or with a kind of, right? And then the third step for this is going to be, for all those things, after you go through and you do those first two columns, for all the things on your list that have a no written next to them, you're going to draw a big red line right through all that stuff, so that can be something to work on, to mentally surrender and recognize, hey, I can't control this or fix it. And then for all the things that you can control or fix, sit down and come up with just one small thing that you can do to begin to address it. Not that you can fix that thing, not that you can make it go away or just make it better overnight, but what's one thing that you can start with, so that you're taking back some of that control that Mark mentioned, that you're able to have some structure to this, to what you're doing in the progression and your relationship, so that it's not just kind of a uh, freewheeling thing. We tend to do much better with structure, and I think it's going to be a big help for all of you listening, as you start to pare down and really focus on those things that you really do have some influence on.
So just to be clear on that assignment, so that they start by writing down all the things that are stressing them out in detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then next to each one of those things they've written down, they write, it's a question of, can I control this?
Yes.
And I either say yes I
Absolutely.
can, no I can't,
Uh-huh.
or did you say maybe or kind of?
Maybe, yeah, or kind of, right? So maybe I can influence it to some degree.
And then once you've answered yes, no, or kind of to each one of those, everyone where it says no I can't, you basically cross that out, as in
Correct.
nothing you can do about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the ones where you have yes I can control it or kind of, and you're just looking to just write down one little thing that you think you can do as some kind of a
Yes.
solution.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think it would actually be good, Mark, as we're talking about it next week. I think our episode ought to be something along the lines of getting into the surrender process that you described.
Yes.
I know we both have a lot of thoughts about that and how to give that away. This is kind of a mental exercise to start that process, and we'll do that next week. Look at this, executive decisions right here in the middle of
There we
filming.
go.
We're next week, everybody. We'll focus specifically on the surrender process, how to let things go, what that looks like, both on a spiritual level as well as on a psychological level.
And really,
Thanks for.
yeah,
Oh, go
next
ahead.
week it'll be, the surrender process. Think of it as, how do you gain maximum power in a time where you believe that you don't have any?
I love it.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Have a great day.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Together, we can do the impossible.
To learn more about Mark and Steve and to listen to more podcast episodes, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.